Hi, and welcome back to
Inspired to Game. I'm Sean.
And I am Lola. Today we are talking about Ex Libris
Revised Edition.
We want to thank Renegade Games for sending us the revised edition to do a review of and a comparison between the original. So before we get into that, we'll give you a very quick overview of how Ex Libris plays. In Ex Libris, you are a collector of rare and valuable books in a magical world, competing to become the Grand Librarian. Over the course of the game, you will be alternating turns, putting out workers on various locations that shift throughout turns, for the purpose of collecting new books to put on your shelf and shelving them into your library. Now, when you shelve books, they must be placed orthogonally adjacent to an already existing book on your shelf, and they must be in alphabetical order in order to score. Your shelf can only be 3 levels high, but can be as wide as you want it to be. At the end of the game, you'll be accruing points based on shelf stability, prominent works you have in your collection, categorical variety, as well as extra points for your personal library focus. You must be careful, however, because you will lose points for any banned books you have in your library. At the end of the game, you will assess who has created the best library and is the new Grand Librarian. Now, this is a game that I had actually hunted down years ago because it was out of print and I love the theme. So, books and games are my 2 favorite things in the whole world, or 2 of them.
Things that go on shelves, go figure.
Exactly. I just love organizing on shelves.
But she doesn't like knickknacks.
Yeah, right from the beginning, we had a ton of fun with Ex Libris. It is a simple worker placement game that has a nice little puzzle with putting down your cards, because they all have to be put down in alphabetical order. You start off by placing 1, and once that first one is done, when you're next placing your next ones, they must be placed orthogonally adjacent. So that could be left or right, or it could be up or down, but you can only have those 3 layers. So once you have a height of 3 cards, you cannot expand that in the vertical dimension anymore. So now you've got your 2 sides on the different levels to play from, and it can be really tricky sometimes depending on what cards you're getting. And so each card has the alphabet that it belongs to, and it also tells you where it sits in that alphabet. So if it's 1 of 7 cards, or 2 of 7, or 6 of 7 sort of thing. So you can always know how much is in between. So to start the game, you'll be drawing the amount of locations as there are players around the table. So if there's 2, you're going to be drawing 2 locations. Now for the next round, whichever is the lowest numbered location gets put up in reserve, and that location is going to continue into the next round, and 2 new locations are drawn. This proceeds throughout the game so that constantly the amount of locations you have is expanding. So the variability of that increases, making each round successfully a little bit more easy as far as you have different options and different choices of ways to accrue new cards that work for you. So it is a really nice game. There's a little puzzle with putting out all of your cards. There's a certain amount of luck. The locations help to minimize that by having places where you can choose cards and which ones work best for you. One thing that I really like is that you are trying to get a whole variety, because you're going to wind up scoring based on what category you have the lowest of. But at the same time, you need to avoid the banned books, because each banned book you have will give you negative points. There's a contest for prominent books, which goes to whoever has the most of that category, and it's different each time based on a pull of a card, as well as you have your secret library focus, which will give you extra points for those kind of books. So all of these considerations makes it a fun little game to explore. So we have enjoyed this game. It is one that has remained on our shelves.
And the numbers on each location, as you shuffle them for each game, they're going to come out in different order, so each game is going to be a little bit different with that variability. Another great thing is that they give you different ways of playing the game. In the beginning, they suggest that you play with just the standard assistants that don't have any special powers, and then once you get used to the game, you can add in the special assistants, and these are asymmetrical player powers that give a little more variety to the game.
Yeah, and they really do, and that is really nice, having those different powers, just like how the rooms come up differently each time too, as far as which ones you get to keep from turn to turn. So there's a nice amount of variability here. So if you have the first, should you get the second? Should you get the expansion? Because the expansion is also out. So we aren't covering the expansion here, but we will say a little bit about it, but we haven't played it ourselves.
Yeah, what we know about it.
Exactly. Some of the very basic things that are different about the game. So one is, as you see from the intro, the first edition is much bigger of a footprint than the second. So the second is much tighter and more compact and a lot less wasted space. And we really like that. It also likewise has lost the player board that is where you put the locations on, which really was a bit superfluous. It wasn't really needed.
So another difference is the first edition had 12 special assistants. They've kept 4 of them in the revised edition, but the other 8 have gone into the expansion.
Along with some other ones into the expansion.
Along with some new ones, apparently.
Yeah, so that was an interesting thing. The assistants are also now screen printed, so the meeples are nicer than in the original.
And look much nicer than the first edition.
Yeah, it's nice having those screen printed meeples versus just the plain ones. So that is a really nice upgrade. One of the most pivotal upgrades that you have in the second edition versus the first is the location cards. They look lovely before, they look really nice still, but they're much more legible. In the new ones, they have an area to the right where there's better contrast to read it, whereas the original, it was kind of lost a little bit in the artwork, so they were difficult to read. Now on top of that too, they now offer an extra reference sheet which has an explanation of what each location does. And it's good to know that the expansion is compatible with either the first or the second edition. So, bottom line, if you have the first edition, I don't think you need to run out and replace it with a second edition, unless you really have trouble reading the location cards and want that upgraded, because I think that was the most major change. It is also nice having the screen printed meeples for the assistants, but you're also losing some assistants unless you also plan on getting the expansion. I gotta say, one of my favorite things about the game though have been the books on the cards, because they're fantastic to read. They're things like Knowledge You'll Never Need, volumes 1, 2, and 3, Brunch or Second Breakfast, 200 pages to start fires with, Things to Be Outraged By, volume 16.
They make fun of, they'll reference famous works and just kind of toy with them, like the Never Starting Story or the Tattletale Heart, things like that. And things that are just made up out of off the cuff, and they're just fantastic and a lot of fun to read.
Yeah, so it really is what makes the game. It's fantastic. The categories are nice. We do really enjoy the game. So bottom line, it is a great game. It's fantastic that they have come out with a new release of it, and particularly one that's a little bit more trimmed down. That also makes it a little more economical and accessible to people, and it works really, really well. So if you have a chance to get it, do look into it. It is a great game. The expansion looks fantastic too, with extra artifacts and then extra assistance as well. They have different mechanics around how it plays too. Thank you so much for watching us today.
If you've enjoyed this video, please support us by subscribing to the channel if you haven't already.
And as always, happy gaming, folks.
I wasn't saying anything. I was just making noise.
Over the course of the game, you'll be alternating turns with your fellow playmates. So over...
This video was brought to you by the word location. Location. You would think one of us was a real estate agent, but neither of us are. A whole shtick about the...
Okay, you do a shtick.
Creating order out of chaos and trying not to sneeze on camera.
There's also a location that... Now I'm self-conscious.
So now go out there and play some games.